Welcome to Module 3, where we're going to dive into the numbers that make rebuilt cars such a compelling opportunity. This is where theory meets reality, and where you'll see exactly how much money you can save and why these savings exist in the first place. By the end of this module, you'll understand the real financial impact of choosing a rebuilt car, how insurance affects the equation, and what kind of savings you can realistically expect based on different types of vehicles. Let's start with the fundamental question. Just how much money can you actually save? The real savings potential. Here's what I found through my own purchases and helping others. You can typically save anywhere from 20 to 40% compared to equivalent clean title vehicles, and sometimes even more depending on the specific situation. Let me give you some real numbers from actual purchases I've been involved with. The friend that I mentioned who saved over $8,000, he was looking at a specific luxury sedan model that typically sells for around $28,000 with a clean title. We found a rebuilt version, the same year, same mileage, and same options for $19,500. That's an $8,500 savings, or about 30% off the clean title price. I've personally bought a rebuilt SUV that would have cost me $15,000 with a clean title. I paid about $10,500 for the rebuilt version. That's a $4,500 savings and a 30% discount for a car that was mechanically identical and cosmetically near perfect. But here's what's interesting. The percentage savings tend to be more significant on higher value vehicles. On a $50,000 luxury car, a 30% discount saves you $15,000. On a $15,000 economy car, the same percentage only gets you about $4,500. Why these savings exist? So why do these dramatic price differences exist? Understanding this helps you see why the opportunity is real and likely to continue. First, there's simple supply and demand. The pool of buyers willing to consider rebuilt cars is much smaller than those who want only clean titles. Reduced demand means lower prices. It's basic economics. Second, financing challenges reduce the buyer pool even further. Most traditional lenders won't finance rebuilt title vehicles, or they'll do so at higher interest rates. This eliminates buyers who need financing, which further reduces demand. Third, the perception factor. Many people hear rebuilt title and immediately assume the car is unreliable or unsafe, even when that's not necessarily true. This perception creates opportunity for informed buyers like yourself. Fourth, insurance considerations affect resale expectations. Since insurance companies base payouts on rebuilt value rather than clean title market value, buyers factor this into their purchase price calculations. None of these factors necessarily reflect the actual quality or reliability of a well-rebuilt vehicle. They're market inefficiencies that create opportunities for educated buyers. Insurance considerations, the reality. Let's talk about insurance, because this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of rebuilt car ownership. First, the good news. Rebuilt cars can absolutely be insured. I've insured every rebuilt car I've owned with major insurance companies without any significant problems. However, there are some important differences that you need to understand. When an insurance company calculates coverage limits and potential payouts, they base their numbers on the rebuilt value of the car, not what an equivalent clean title vehicle would be worth. This means if your rebuilt car is totaled in an accident, your payout will be based on what other rebuilt cars of the same type are selling for, not clean title vehicles. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you buy a rebuilt car for $20,000 that would cost $30,000 with a clean title. If that car is totaled 6 months later, your insurance payout will be based on rebuilt car values, probably something close to what you paid, not the $30,000 clean title vehicle. This isn't necessarily bad news because you also paid less to begin with, but it's important to understand so that you can make informed decisions about coverage levels. Some insurance companies do charge slightly higher premiums for rebuilt title vehicles, while others charge the same as they would for clean titles. It varies by company, so it's worth shopping around. The key is to get quotes before you buy, not after. Make sure you can get adequate coverage at a price you're comfortable with. Different types of rebuilt vehicles. Now let's talk about how savings vary depending on what type of rebuilt vehicle you're considering, because this makes a big difference in both price and value. At one end of the spectrum, you have nearly new vehicles that suffered early damage. These might be cars with 5,000 miles or less that were in minor accidents, caught in hailstorms, or damaged during transport. The mechanical condition is essentially new, but the title status creates significant savings opportunities. I've seen cars less than a year old with minimal mileage sell for 40 to 50% less than identical clean title vehicles. The savings can be enormous because you're essentially buying a new car at used car prices. In the middle, you have moderately used vehicles that were rebuilt after more significant damages. These might be 2 to 5 year old cars that were in serious accidents but were professionally rebuilt. The savings are typically in the 25 to 35% range. And at the other end, you have older vehicles that have been completely refurbished. These might be 8 to 15-year-old cars that were essentially given a second life through comprehensive rebuilding. The percentage savings might be smaller, but the absolute dollar amounts can still be significant. The key is matching your expectations to the type of vehicle you're considering. A nearly new rebuilt car should perform like a new car. An extensively refurbished older car might have quirks or characteristics that reflect its age and history. Calculating true value. When evaluating rebuilt cars, I use a simple framework to calculate true value, and I'm going to share that with you. First, determine what you'd pay for an equivalent clean title vehicle. Use resources like Kelley Blue Book or Edmunds or local market research to establish this baseline. Second, factor in the rebuilt title discount. Start with an assumption of 25 to 30% off the clean title price, then adjust based on the specific vehicle and situation. Third, add back any additional costs you might incur. This could include higher insurance premiums, additional inspections, or potential repair costs if the rebuild quality isn't perfect. Fourth, consider the resale impact. Plan on the vehicle maintaining its rebuilt status throughout your ownership, which will affect its future value. Finally, factor in your personal situation. If you plan to drive the car for many years, the long-term value equation is different than if you typically trade cars in every few years. Let me walk you through a real example. Say you're looking at a rebuilt car priced at $18,000. The equivalent clean title version costs $26,000. That's an $8,000 savings, or about 30%. But let's say your insurance will cost an extra $300 per year, and you estimate you might need to spend an extra $5,000 over your ownership period dealing with rebuilt-related issues. Over 5 years, that's $2,000 in additional costs. So your real savings is $8,000 minus $2,000, or $6,000. That's still a 23% discount, which represents excellent value. Financing considerations. Now let's talk about financing, because this affects the total cost equation. Some lenders won't refinance rebuilt title vehicles at all. Others will finance them, but at higher interest rates, sometimes 1 to 2 percentage points higher than for clean title cars. However, many credit unions and some banks treat rebuilt cars the same as clean title vehicles for financing purposes. It's worth shopping around to find the best rates. There's also the option of cash purchases. If you can buy a rebuilt car with cash that you would have financed otherwise, you can save both the interest costs and any potential financing complications. Some buyers use the savings from buying rebuilt to move up to a higher trim level or a newer model year than they could otherwise afford. This can be a smart strategy if you find the right vehicle. Real-world value examples. So let me share some additional real-world examples to help you understand the value potential. I helped someone find a rebuilt pickup which would have cost $35,000 with a clean title. The rebuilt version cost $24,000, an $11,000 savings. That truck had been in a rear-end collision that damaged the bed and the tailgate, but all the mechanical components were untouched. After the professional repair, it was indistinguishable from a clean title truck. Another example, a rebuilt luxury SUV that would have been $45,000 with a clean title was purchased for $31,000. The car had fairly extensive collision damage, but was completely stripped down and rebuilt by a specialty shop. The savings were $14,000 and the car performed flawlessly. On the other hand, I've seen some rebuilt cars that weren't good values because the initial asking price was too high, or because the rebuild quality was poor enough that there were going to be some additional repair costs, eliminating the savings. The key is understanding what you're looking at and doing the math based on the specific situation. Long-term ownership economics. One important consideration is how rebuild title status affects long-term ownership economics. The good news is that well-rebuilt cars can be just as reliable as clean title vehicles. I've owned rebuilt cars that required no more maintenance or repair than any other used vehicle. The challenge is that you need to factor in potentially higher repair costs if non-standard parts were used in the rebuild, or if you need service from mechanics who aren't familiar with the specific rebuild work that was done. You may also need to plan for the fact that your car will always carry the rebuild title, which affects resale value. But if you're saving 25 to 40% on the initial purchase, you can afford to take a hit on resale and still come out ahead. What's coming up next? In Module 4, we're going to explore the quality spectrum of rebuilt cars. You'll learn about the dramatic differences between amateur rebuilds and professional work, and I'll share detailed examples from my own experience to help you understand what to look for. We'll also discuss how to identify the signs of quality work versus corner cutting, which is crucial for getting good value rather than inheriting problems. Wrap up. So to recap Module 3, rebuilt cars typically offer 20 to 40% savings compared to clean title vehicles. These savings exist due to reduced demand, financing challenges, and insurance considerations, not necessarily because of inferior quality. The key is understanding the true cost equation, including insurance, financing, and long-term ownership factors. So, now you have the framework to evaluate whether a specific rebuilt car represents a good value for your situation. I'll see you in Module 4 where we explore the quality spectrum of rebuilt vehicles.